Shabbat Shalom. We who live in the 21st century are often a little disconnected from the natural world. I know I grew up in Troy. It's a perfectly laid out city. The meat just shows up magically in cellophane packages. The vegetables, perfectly green or red or purple, show up magically in the grocery store aisles. Everything is neat and clean, just the way I like it. We're a little disconnected from the natural world. The story is told of a certain man dressed very casually, jeans, t-shirt, jacket, who walks into the nicest steakhouse in town and sits down. The manager comes over to the man and says, "Sir, you know that this is the nicest steakhouse in town. How could you possibly afford a meal here at our restaurant?" The man looks back at the manager and he says, "Okay, fair enough. If I can show you something you've never seen before, will you give me a free meal?" The manager thought for a second with a little anxiety and said, "Okay, it's a deal. If you can show me something I've never seen before, then sure enough, I'll give you a free meal." So the man in his blue jeans and t-shirt reaches into his raggedy jacket pocket and pulls out a hamster, puts the hamster on the ground and gives a little patch on the tuchus and sends the hamster forward. The hamster runs over to this most beautiful piano you've ever seen, jumps up on the piano, and begins playing Gershwin songs. The manager looks at the hamster, looks at the man, and says, "Okay, you've shown me something I've never seen before. It's a deal. Have a free meal." So throughout the meal, the hamster is playing the Gershwin music. The man's enjoying his wonderful meal when he sees the dessert cart go by. So the man turns to the manager and says, "I'd really love something from that dessert cart." The manager, now feeling a little confident, says, "Okay, fine. If you can pull another miracle out of your sleeve, then I'll give you some free dessert." Sure enough, the man reaches into his other pocket, pulls out a frog, puts the frog on top of the table. And lo and behold, the frog starts singing songs from Gershwin. They're a duet, they're playing together. Well, the guy at the table behind the man sees the singing frog and gets so excited. He rushes over to the man and says, "I have to have that frog. I'll give you $300 for your singing frog." The man says, "It's a deal." The other guy takes the frog, rushes out of the store, and you could see dollar signs in his eyes. He was so excited about the new singing frog that he acquired. Well, sure enough, the manager comes over to the man and says, "How could you give away the singing frog? That could be worth millions." The guy looks up at the manager and says, "What you don't know is that the hamster is also a ventriloquist." It's not Carly Schwartz quality, but it's not bad. It's not bad. With that, we turn to the penultimate Torah portion in our Torah this morning, Parashat Ha-azinu. And whereas through most of the Torah, Moses gives us history and he gives us laws, he changes his style a little bit because these are his last words. What we have in this week's Torah portion are among Moses' last words before he dies and the Israelites continue on without him. And so rather than give us more history, rather than give us more laws, Moses switches gears and he gives us poetry. Moses gives us poetry with his last words. And I want to invite you to look with me at the poetry that Moses gives, and especially at the way Moses invokes the natural world to convey his thoughts. Because you see, our ancestors were much more in tune with nature than we are today. If you want, I'm on page 1187 in my Eitz Chaim Chumash, page 1187. We are in the 32nd chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. Page 1187, Moses says, Ki chelek Hashem amo Yaakov chevel nachlato. For the Lord's portion is God's people. Jacob, his own allotment. And now here in just a moment, we're going to see the way Moses refers to the Jewish people by the singular Jacob, right? Our shared ancestor, Jacob. God found him, that is, God found Jacob in a desert region. Yimsa'ehu ba'eretz midbar. In an empty, howling waste, the translation tells us. But the Hebrew gives us something a little more powerful. And that, of course, is the beauty of poetry, is the multiple levels of meaning. Because it says in the second part of verse 10, Uvatohu Yalel Yishmon. We know the word tohu from early in Genesis. Because when God begins creating the world, what God sees on earth is tohu vavohu. Strange words, tohu vavohu. And our translators struggle to come up with what is that, but it's some sort of primordial ooze, some sort of chaos, some sort of unformed mess that God finds. And early in Genesis, what does God begin doing? God takes that primordial ooze, God takes the mess, and begins bringing order to it. Creation, early Genesis that we're going to read in just a week and a half, is all about bringing order to chaos. It's about bringing order to chaos. And here we see a little reference of it. God found the Jewish people in a desert region, uvatohu, in the midst of chaos. God found them and wanted to bring order. In the midst of profound injustice, God sought to bring justice. And so the text continues. God engirded him, God engirded Jacob, watched over him, guarded him as the pupil of his eye. Beautiful Hebrew if you want to look at the Hebrew, if you know your Hebrew. Then we come to verse 11. Kinesher Yair Kino, like an eagle who rouses his nestlings. Al Gozlav Yirachef. Translation, guiding down to his young. Here we see God as an eagle, gliding down to his young, the translation tells us. But if we know our Torah, and I know this congregation knows its Torah, we hear another reference to an eagle in Exodus. When God is referred to as an eagle carrying the Jewish people on eagle's wings out of Egypt and toward the promised land. God is an eagle swooping us out of danger and bringing us to safety. And here we have another beautiful reference to Genesis, Al Gozlav Yirachef. We know this word from early in Genesis because God saw that chaos. God saw that tohu and that vohu. And it says that the Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, mirachefet alamayim, hovered above that water. And we see that exact same word here. It's not gliding down to his young. God hovers above like a watchful parent. Then, of course, the Torah continues. So did God spread God's wings and take him, bear him along his pinions. The Lord alone did guide him, no alien God at his side. So here, Moses' beautiful imagery harkens back to Genesis and how God brought order to the chaos. And here, Moses, with his beautiful imagery, harkens back to Exodus, reminding us about how God brought us out of slavery, out of bondage, on eagle's wings, and carried us to safety. But here in the beauty of the poetry, we see a little something different. Moses takes it a step farther. Moses calls us God's nestlings. Why? Because God is about to put us in our nest in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. God is about to bring us home. But what does an eagle do? Does an eagle just remain in its nest? No. An eagle soars to the heavens. An eagle scouts the land. And here I think comes to our message for this Shabbat, right in between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. We have so much for which to be thankful for. God has put us in this amazing nest, in this sanctuary, the land of Israel, these United States of America. But we also have an obligation to soar from our nests, to see who is in need, and to lift them on our wings, to carry them to safety, just as God carried us to safety. I think, too, there's another message in this text. That on Yom Kippur, we're supposed to remember to leave the very earthliness of our bodies, because our bodies drag us down with our laziness, with our arrogance, with our violence and our jealousy. And we're supposed to soar to the heavens like an eagle, to strive to be soulful like God, to strive to truly be spiritual, to be holy, to care for others the way God, like an eagle in the sky, is always ascending. And there's a third message, too, that really comes from a Hasidic Rabbi from the 19th century. And he, much more in tune with the natural world than we are. He says that every year an eagle sheds its feathers and then grows them back even more beautiful. And this Shabbat, in between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, we remember that we're supposed to be in the process of shedding our feathers, shedding the characteristics that we don't want, that we don't need to carry with us into the next year, and growing new feathers, so that as this year continues, we're even more beautiful than we were before. With just a few verses, Moses reminds us that we're supposed to ascend toward the heavens. Moses reminds us that like an eagle, we're supposed to carry those in need on our wings. And like an eagle, we're supposed to shed our feathers to begin this new year even more beautiful than we were before. No, we Jews are not a piano-playing ventriloquist hamster. But we're not allowed to be a frog that just pretends either. Rather, we're challenged to be eagles who in every way soar. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will, and let us say together, Amen.